Welcome to the Through These Gates podcast, the most rational Nebraska football show spanning across the airwaves. This feels like a bad comedy at this point. It does. It feels like a bad, and the reason I say a bad comedy and not just a comedy is when the first Hangover movie came out, it was a brand new story structure. It was hilarious, right? And then when the sequel came out and it followed the exact same plot line as the original, it was like, okay, what else do you got for me? And then they made a third one and it was basically the same plot line as the first two, and it was just horrible. That's why I say this is like a bad comedy movie. How does this keep happening? How? We got rid of the coach. We got rid of the AD. We brought Frank Solich back. We brought Blonde Herbie back. We did all the shit that was supposed to reverse the curse. I wasn't expecting them to win, but just the way they lost is what makes it so. If they would have lost by a score, and it ended with, Nebraska goes down the field and they have a good drive, and maybe Minnesota holds them and they punt, or Nebraska scores and then Minnesota gets the ball back and goes back down and scores as well. I wouldn't have been mad about that. You got a new coach. It is what it is, man. Minnesota's not a pushover team. Well, I hope they did. This isn't their Northwestern 2022 moment, but Minnesota's not a pushover team. I wasn't going to be too worried about it, but the fact that it ended the way so many games the last few years have ended, it's just like, oh boy. I'm not saying I joked on Facebook about fire Matt Rule just because it's funny to be outrageous like that. But no, I'm not saying fire Matt Rule. He has got a long way to go to get the cancer from the previous administration, and that's what it was a cancer, out of this locker room. He has got his work cut out for him, and I think he knew that when he took the job. And I think he's the type of person that can right this ship and turn it around. He's not going to be able to cut any corners, though. That's been clear. That's been made clear. He's not going to be able to cut any corners. He's not going to be able to take any shortcuts. You are going to have to completely reboot this. You are restoring an engine, basically the entire engine of a car. You're not going to be able to keep anything. It's going to have to be a hard reset on everything. Jeff Sims. Just initial thoughts from the game. I don't know. Jeff Sims, I told you so. I am very skeptical. I told you in the preseason episode, I was very skeptical of Jeff Sims. I wasn't buying the hype of Jeff Sims. I told you when they brought Jeff Sims in, I looked at his stats and I'm like, okay, the last quarterback we had that came in that had a bad touchdown to interception ratio. And the knock on him was that, well, if he just gets the right coaching staff and the right pieces around him, maybe he'll be able to put together some legitimate seasons. That was Tanner Lee. And I'm going to tell you, Jeff Sims looked worse than Tanner Lee right now, or last night. If he were a freshman or a JUCO transfer, or it was, he redshirted last year and rode the bench, and now he's coming in as a starter, I wouldn't be as pessimistic. But the reality is there's 3 years of footage of this guy doing this exact same shit at another Power 5 school. This isn't new. He is what he is. And I think a lot of us bought into the hype the same way we did with Tanner Lee, that he was going to be better once he got into a program that put some more pieces around him and coached him up a little bit better. He is what he is. He's not getting any better. We're stuck with him for the next 2 years, and it's going to be a long He's a very good runner. Very good runner. He's the best runner I've seen that we had at quarterback since probably Taylor Martinez. Very good on his feet. There's no doubt about that. But oh my God, he is such a bad passer. So he actually reminds me of Jamal Lord, the way he runs. That's what I pointed out to someone through a text message yesterday. But he also, unfortunately, reminds me of Jamal Lord the way he throws. So there's also that. With that said, we're stuck with him for the next 2 years because I don't see anyone on this depth chart rising to the occasion. I mean, they're playing Harburg at receiver. If there was anything there, he'd be in the discussion. There's nothing there. We know what we got with Purdy. Don't buy that hype train again. If Purdy's the answer, it's a stupid question. He's not the guy either. I thought Casey Thompson didn't get a fair shake. I thought personally that Rule did what Bill Callahan did with Sam Keller, which was crown your new transfer as the starter, which he did over Joe Gans, and not give anybody else a chance. Basically just run everyone else off. Joe Gans, if the transfer portal were around in 2007, Joe Gans would have transferred. Pelini would have been stuck with God knows who as his quarterback his first year. I felt Casey Thompson basically got the Joe Gans treatment. That was my opinion. I would have liked to see what he could have done. I was a firm believer. I was a Casey supporter last year. I was critical of him when he needed to be critical of him, but I thought he was a good decision maker. He had a cannon for an arm. The biggest arm I've ever seen from a quarterback at Nebraska in I don't know how long. And I thought from the beginning he was an NFL quarterback if you could protect him, which they couldn't do, which we'll get into that in a minute. I thought he got an unfair shake. It is what it is, though. He's gone. He's playing at Florida Atlantic now and doing whatever. I wish him the best, truly. I don't blame him for leaving. I would have left, too. It became very clear when Rule, and I'm going to be critical of Rule, guys. I'm not going to sit here and ball wash him because he's the new coach and I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. I think he's going to work out, but I'm going to be critical of him when I need to be critical of him. And there's a lot to criticize this week. I think, excuse me, if I were a quarterback who started last year, and I had not a great season, but a good season. I'm not a Heisman candidate headed into the next year, but I had a solid season last year. Injuries, protection problems, had a play call, an offensive coordinator that called plays like a coward, but all things considered, I managed. That's Casey Thompson, right? And a new coach comes in. I'm already a little skeptical, right? Because a new coach, especially in the era of the transfer portal, he wants to leave his mark and do his thing. I'm already a little skeptical. So new coach comes in. He brings this other quarterback in that's only got 2 years of eligibility left. It's not like this, and I've only got one. So I don't think this quarterback is coming from another Power 5 school with 2 years of eligibility wanting to sit behind me the first year. And I don't think that he would have committed if they wouldn't have told him, hey, you're probably going to be the guy. Coach comes in, and when he talks about you, Nick Baugh made a great point about this, and I concur. When he talks about you, he never says anything negative. But it's, yeah, Casey. But when he talks about Jeff Sims, think of the comparisons he made. NFL prospect, Vince Young style player, cannon for an arm, athletic freak. I mean, all those things. It was very clear who the guy was going to be before the year even started. And I get it from a new coach perspective. You want to change things up. You want to bring your guys in there. You know, these guys couldn't cut it last year. Why am I going to bring them in? I understand that. I completely understand that. But I also understand why Casey transferred, and I don't fault him for that. The call. That's the next thought I had. The end of the first half touchdown that got called back. We got jobbed. We got ripped off on the initial call and then ripped off again on the replay call. It was clear that was a touchdown. The only question I have is which gambling service did the replay refs use when they put all that money on Minnesota? There was also the false start on the game-winning touchdown on fourth down. Clearly a false start. Didn't get called. Left tackle moved a whole half second before the ball got snapped. No call. I called it in real time. I saw it. And then they slowed it back down in a Twitter video. And I'm like, this is egregious. And they didn't call it. And so bad calls. But here's the thing, guys. In 2020, the Big Ten made it clear that them not wanting to play the you-know-what year, because I can't say that word on YouTube or they'll yank it down, the you-know-what year, the Big Ten made it clear that their aspirations for not playing in 2020 had nothing to do with football and everything to do with politics. And I'm not going to get political on the show. I don't give a shit if you like Trump or Biden or Kanye West. I don't care. But the Big Ten, because the commissioner said it about a month before he called the season off, that he wanted to be the first college football conference to influence an election. Then he called the season off. Nebraska caused a big stink. A couple other schools followed suit. And ever since that moment, when Nebraska said, screw you, you're not going to use our football season and what pays the bills for however many businesses in Lincoln, Nebraska, and keeps a bunch of kids, in school and out of trouble, and funds a lot of the other activities for our university, you're not going to use that as a pawn in your political game because you have aspirations beyond football. We're not going to do that because it's very clear Kevin Warren, the commissioner at the time, wanted to have a future in politics. The Big Ten Conference was not his end game, right? Nebraska said, screw you. That's not going to happen. And ever since that season, ever since the opening kickoff of that 2020 season, we have not gotten a single 50-50 call go our way. Not one. Not from the replay refs, not from the on-the-field refs, nobody. You get Big Ten announcers that almost sound like they're rooting against us when we take the field, and you know what? It is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it for the foreseeable, and Rule knows that when he took the job. And you have to, unfortunately, you have to adjust accordingly. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of the situation. You have to adjust accordingly to the fact that you, for the foreseeable future, are not going to get another 50-50 call that goes your way. And you got to figure it out from there. You have to adjust accordingly. You have to change the way you coach and change the way you call the game. You have to win in spite. You have to not need those calls to win the game. And we didn't get that. We didn't do that. We're on the goal. I mean, yeah, that call literally changed the course of the game. Minnesota won because of that call. I mean, if it's called right, if it's called correctly, it's a touchdown, right? Or they at least go back. If they go back and review it after the first play, or after the play where I believe it was Irvin was tackled and called down, rather than after they called a false start, then the false start never happens. Nebraska gets a chance to decompress, lines up. Even if they don't call it a touchdown, the false start never happens because Nebraska gets a chance to decompress. They line up on the goal line, and now you're talking about a half-yard QB sneak versus, second and goal from the 7 or 6 or whatever it was. That's a huge difference. Again, Jeff Sims, you got to know, you got to have situational awareness. You got to know where you are, how much time's left on the clock. Throw it out of bounds. When in doubt, throw it out of the back of the end zone. He could have done that. He didn't. He forced it into double coverage, and it got picked. That first interception was horrible. Horrible. I mean, that guy was open. That was a 20-yard catch. That was a 20-yard pass, or more. And he just threw it over his head. And then the third one was just the icing on the shit cake. And then Anthony Grant, who's listed as the third stringer on your depth chart, why is he in at the end of the game when you're trying to salt it away? There's just a lot of decisions that I'm questioning here. And I'm not making, $70, $80 million to coach football, so maybe I shouldn't quit, but still. I'm paying for the tickets. I'm going to the game, so I'm kind of paying for it in a way. It's like I have a say in how my tax dollars are spent, theoretically. Last thought, offensive line. Raiola. I told you. Again, I told you so. We are going to regret bringing Raiola back. The assistant offensive line coach from a bad NFL team. We're going to regret bringing him back. And you cannot tell me that they didn't bring Raiola back solely based on the fact they thought they had a shot with his nephew. And maybe they did. That's the only reason they brought it back. They brought him back. There's no other reason. He was horrible last year. You fired everyone else. Coaches like Bill Bush that objectively had a much better season than Raiola and kept him. There's no reason. We're going to regret this. And the problem is now, if you fire him at the end of this season, you look like an idiot, and it becomes clear. It's egg on your face. It becomes clear that you kept him just to get a shot at his nephew. So it's almost like you're in for a 2-year deal with him the same way you are with Sims. So it's almost like we're stuck with him for the next 2 years. And, oh boy, I don't know. It's not a good look. The offensive line looked horrible. They didn't get any better. I understand there's some personnel issues there, but At some point, you got to stop blaming the players and start blaming the people that are putting them in the positions to fail as much as they do. Raiola is not a good coach. I have seen nothing from Raiola to make me think otherwise. To make me think, let's hold out for another year because this guy might have something. I've seen nothing. And he's done a good job on the recruiting trail. Maybe they should give him another year. They've got some good players coming in. That Tauma is coming in. They've got a couple other offensive linemen coming in from Texas. I know that Grant Bricks from Iowa, I believe. They're projected to get him. They're still in the mix with Brandon Baker, the number 1 offensive tackle in the country out of California. So maybe they get this all-star, this star-studded offensive line in there. And that makes all the difference and reverses course for Raiola. I don't see it, though. I don't see it. If you look at previous offensive lines we had, not even good offensive lines, like in the Pelini era and the Callahan era, those offensive lines weren't made up of 4- and 5-star recruits. You had guys that developed the talent there. You had 2, 3 stars and walk-ons. You had a couple 4 stars, but for the most part, you look back at these Nebraska offensive linemen that went on to play in the NFL, long times in the NFL. Jeremiah Searles was a 3-star. Matt Slauson, 0 stars. Matt Slauson had 0 stars when he was recruited by Bill Callahan. Arguably, the best Nebraska offensive lineman over the last however many years. Nick Gates, 3 stars. Trying to think. The list goes on and on and on. Brent Cavalli, 3 stars. These guys weren't big shot offensive linemen. It wasn't with offensive linemen. It's a lot about who you develop when you bring them in. And now it helps to get the 5-star offensive tackle that's 6'6", 315 pounds. Believe me, I understand that. But offensive line is like the one position where you don't have to get the star-studded guys to develop not a great unit, but a solid unit. And Raiola hasn't shown that he's capable of doing that yet. So I'm very skeptical of Donovan Raiola and his future going forward with this team. Anyway, that's been our show. Let me know in the comments on YouTube what you think. Am I right? Am I wrong? What did I miss? What should I talk about next week? What do you think? Let me know in the comments your predictions for the Colorado game, the score. I still think we beat Colorado by a couple of scores. If we lose to Colorado the same way we did, buckle up because we may not win a game. Buckle up. That's all I'll say. That's all we got. This has been the Through These Gates podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Like, subscribe, share around with your friends. I'll talk to you later. Peace.